this is just an extra level of complexity because I want this double knee in, because I think you get better deformations splitting the knee in two, and it's more anatomically correct than if you have a single knee. But that causes issues with dealing with mocap rigs, because the human IK and Motion Builder don't have a representation for this double knee as of this time, so this is basically a big huge workaround. So what we've basically done is we, for the legs, have created 5 rigs. We have your keyframe rig, you have your mocap rig, and then for each one of those you have a driver, and then there's the bind. So now the last thing we need to do is connect them all up. Now we're missing one controller here that is going to be very, very important, and that is what is going to control the switch between mocap and keyframe. So we're going to just create that real quick. So now we've created our control for switching between the mocap and keyframe rigs. It's got the regular translates, rotates on there, but eventually we're going to lock and hide those because we don't need any of them. What we need to do is create some custom attributes. These are all going to be 0 to 1 floats. We'll need left leg, right leg, spine, neck, left arm, left hand, right arm, and right hand. We don't want to do it on all or nothing, because what might happen is, say for example that you have an animation of a guy running with a gun from a mocap shoot. A lot of times mocap won't pick up the hands and the fingers. It's too fine of detail, although that's changing. But let's just say for example that the mocap didn't pick it up, or maybe the mocap did pick it up but the gun grip changed in the model, and so you need to edit the animation. You may want to disable the mocap for the hands in favor of your keyframe rig on the hands to create the new pose as an option. Maybe you have a mocap of a guy idling, but he needs to hold on to a rail, and you want to use the keyframe rig to use the IK to lock the hand in place. And these are just examples of why you would want to be able to switch the rigs between mocap and keyframe in sections. So now that we have the switch, that's the last component we need to connect these drivers to the bind. So again, I'm going to unhide the bind. As of right now, we really don't need the mocap anymore. We just need the drivers. And for right now, we don't need the keyframe rig anymore. We just need the drivers. So I'm just going to hide that to get it out of the way for now. What we do need is our bind. You also notice that our drivers have this hip joint. We will eventually move that to a different group node, but for right now, just to maintain the hierarchy and the orientation, I'm just leaving that joint in there. We'll be removing it eventually. So what we need is the left thigh mocap driver, the left thigh keyframe driver, and the left thigh. Okay. Oh, there's one other thing we need. We need that nice new controller I just spent all that time making. So let's grab that. Now I'm just grabbing the input connections because all the output connections, it's connected to skin clusters and hair and all this other kind of stuff, so it just chugs and I don't really need it right now. I never named this. Let's name this the mocap keyframe switch control. There we go. Okay. So again, we have our bind. This is our bind thigh. This is the mocap driver, which is driven by the mocap skeleton. This is the keyframe driver, which is driven by the keyframe skeleton. And have slight rotations on them, so I'm just going to fix that later. There's a way to fix that. Okay. So how do we connect these two? How do we make all this? Now this is going to be our controller that tells us we're going to switch between these two, and this is what's eventually going to be driven. So what we need is create the render node. These are hypershade nodes, but they can be used anywhere. Maya is great like that. Everything's just a node, and even though this is technically a hypershade node, Maya doesn't really care. Go under utilities, and we're going to go with the blend colors node. What the friggin' hell is a blend colors node? When a blend colors node is actually designed to blend between two different textures or two different colors. However, all it's really doing underneath the hood is blending two different sets of numbers, and so we can give it any different set of numbers we want. So let's start by putting rotate X into color 1. Now you're not showing anything, so let's make sure that our auxiliary nodes are on, because it's creating this unit conversion node. And if you don't have your auxiliary nodes on, it's going to look like nothing's connecting. Rotate Y to the color 2. Where'd you go? There we go. And rotate Z to the color B. So our XYZ becomes the RGB. And you can see the values right in there. And we'll do the same thing to our mocap driver. We'll put that into the other one. Rotate X into color 2 R. Rotate Y and the color 2 G. And rotate Z and the color 2 B. Now you may be asking yourself, how come I'm not just taking rotate and sticking it to color 2? Why am I doing it one at a time? If you do it, rotate the color instead of doing each individual one, it will tend to evaluate weird on occasion. It's a bug in Maya that the last time I checked, which was 1 or 2 years ago, it's never been fixed. It's been there for at least 5 years now. So I tend to do one at a time, and I have no trouble. Okay, so now we're going to connect the G to the Y, and the B to the Z. What about the R? We haven't connected the R. Well, this guy's got a roll joint, so we need to do something for that. Again, I'm going to grab the inputs. What we want is for the roll joint and the thigh joint to each have half the X rotation. I've tried doing things where this takes up all the X, and what happens is eventually getting the rotations where they split and it causes problems. A 50-50 split doesn't have the same problem. Depends on how many roll joints you have. If you have one roll joint, you're dividing by 2. Half goes to the roll joint, half goes to the base. If you have 2 roll joints, you divide by 3. 3 roll joints divide by 4, so on and so on and so on. So how do you divide? You could create an expression, but they are horrible to evaluate and they're slow. Best way is to create a multiply divide node. Take the output R, we'll put that in the input X. Come in here to the attribute editor, set this to divide, and set that to 2. Or you can multiply it by 0.5. Either way works. I prefer using divide for, again, example, you can't really divide by 3 cleanly. You can multiply by 0.33, but then there's still a fraction missing, so I just divide by 3. So just out of practice, I switch it to divide. So now we're going to take the output, and that goes into the rotate X, and then it also goes into the rotate X of the roll joint. So now I have to blend colors, but right now the blend colors is set at 0.5 and 0.5. So let me show you what that's doing right now. If I unhide that, so now if I rotate this thigh in FK, you'll see that the bind joints are only going halfway. Well, why is that? Well, because the blender is set to 0.5, so it's taking the rotations from the keyframe and blending them with the rotations from the mocap rig. And right now it's at a 0.5, so it's at an average. If I shift it to 0, it's now getting all the information from the mocap. If I shift it to 1, now it's all keyframe. And you can kind of see how that goes back and forth like that. Okay, so the mocap to keyframe switch is what's going to control that blender attribute. So if we simply take that, and this is the left leg, and stick that to blender, and right now that attribute is at 0, but then we can keyframe mocap, keyframe mocap, and that's what we basically have to do with the other joints in the leg, and then the legs will be ready to go. So the last little bit is we have to hook up this roll joint here in the shin. Now if you remember from our previous episodes, we have a roll joint here in the thigh, and the way we did that was we simply took the control structure, took the X rotation divided by half, and piped half into that joint, half into this joint. That's not going to work for this down here. A couple reasons for that. One, we've locked this joint, or this controller, into only the Y rotation. We did that for a couple of reasons, but mainly because the IK is going to lock that rotation down to only Y, so even if you could rotate it in FK, you still wouldn't have access to it in IK. I would rather have a solution that would work under both circumstances. So what we need is for that roll joint to be driven by the rotation of this joint. That's more intuitive anyway. If you're going to move the foot and you move it in position, you wouldn't want to rotate the foot by rotating this joint. You would want to do it by rotating this one. And it's a way more of an IK solution for that roll. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create our driver. And this will be our we'll take that joint and this one, copy its transformations. Notice that this is upside down. The reason for that is because the right side has the X inverted. So we'll just set that to a -10. So we want these two joints to match. As you can see right now, this has all kinds of rotations on it. That's not going to work for the kind of direct connecting we've been doing. So what we need to do is we need to give it a parent that has the same world space coordinates as the parent of the joint we're trying to drive. So we'll create an empty null, call that alright, Shin roll driver parent. Let's go ahead and select that one. And our null. Let's constrain that. Make sure all the orientates or the offsets are off. So there he is right there. Now we take that right Shin driver and parent it right there. Same with this one. Okay. So now we're going to create an IK handle. What we're going to do is we're going to create an SC solver. Now if you remember right, SC solvers are designed to handle single chains like this. This is what they're designed for. And one of the things that makes a SC solver an SC solver is that the rotation of the joint comes from the rotation of the IK handle itself, as opposed to an RP handle, which comes from either a twist value or from a pole vector. Go ahead and create our SE handle. So what we're going to do is we're going to select that joint. We're going to select the handle. Go ahead and point constrain it. Let's go ahead and parent constrain it, but we're going to take the translates off because we already did that. We're going to have the maintain offset on for the rotate. And then we are going to parent that up into here. So now if you come and take this, first let's check our driver, make sure our driver's fine. And we can see it's not, because we reparented and then fixed the rotate orders, so we'll fix that real quick. And we'll copy the joint orientate, and there you go. So they now have the exact same, no, they don't have the exact same parent, but their parents are in the exact same world space positions, and they have the same local orientation, translations, and joint orientates. So now if we take this and we rotate, you'll see that our driver has rotated as well. So now it's a simple matter of connecting our driver to the bind joint. So the one question you're asking yourself is, why go through all the trouble of having a driver? Why not just put the IK system on the roll joint itself? A couple of reasons. One, I primarily work in games and I try to keep my bind as clean as possible. It helps with things like exporting, or if you have to rebind your skin, you don't want to have to hunt for which joints you want to bind to and which ones you don't. So anything you're skinning to, you kind of want out of that bind hierarchy. And again, if you're working on a game engine, you don't want to have to weed a bunch of stuff out when you're exporting. The other reason is, at this point we only have one roll joint, so that makes for a very simple thing, but if we had 2 or 3 roll joints, we would want to take this value here and divide it. We don't at this point in time, but I could see a situation where I would have 2 or 3 roll joints. So the same solution would work. And so now they're connected. And that's it. Our legs are rigged up. This has been a long series. I've gone into quite a bit of detail. Hopefully this has been helpful, and we will continue on with the spine and the arms and everything else until this character's done. So I hope you continue to join us. Thank you very much.